Hello, and thank you for taking the time to watch this video guidance for the Libraries Improvement Fund, LIF, Round 4. This video guidance includes British Sign Language, BSL, interpretation, and automated captions, which are visible on the screen. You will find the PowerPoint file with notes alongside a transcript on the same webpage as this recording. This is the second of two guidance videos about Round 4 of the Libraries Improvement Fund. The first was an introduction to the fund and a guide on how to complete the expression of interest, and can be found on our website. This second video will focus on the application stage and is for those who have been recommended to proceed to submit a full application to Round 4 of LIF. This guidance video will have a brief reminder of the programme, including the aims of the fund and timelines, as well as what to expect from the application form and required attachments. We will not go into full detail of every step, as this is covered in the applicant guidance, frequently asked questions, and the first video guidance, which can be found on our website. The second part of this video guidance today will focus mainly on completing your application. There have been 3 rounds of LIF so far, and over that time we've seen some very strong applications, as well as a number of regular mistakes that have tripped people up. We want to help you to write the best application you can. In this second section, we'll look at writing your application, budgets, building project requirements, including access audits, and digital projects. So let's get started. Quick reminder of the aims of the fund. LIF is an open access capital fund targeted at local authority library services based in England. To apply for funding to undertake capital infrastructure work, which will help address historic underinvestment in technology and buildings. As with previous rounds of LIF, it is anticipated that the fund will be investing in investment in digital infrastructure and in physical spaces. Through these project types, the fund aims to increase the sustainability and potential for transformation of libraries by developing more flexible and more commercial spaces, increase and improve digital access within communities, and connect libraries to their communities and increase library use. The reason we're flagging these is that in assessment and decision making, we are looking for projects that deliver against these aims. So it's worth having them at the front of your mind when planning and writing your application and referring to them where relevant. Here is a brief recap of the timeline. The expressions of interest stage has now been completed, and for those who've been invited to apply, we're now at the application stage. Grantium opens for full applications at 10 AM on Tuesday, 24th of June, 2025. The deadline for full applications is 12 PM midday on Friday, the 1st of August, 2025. Final decisions will be made in late 2025, and we will be notifying applicants and making announcements no later than March 2026. Projects will begin from April 2026 and can run for up to 3 years, finishing by 31st of March 2029. So let's move on to the application form. The full guidance, including fully accessible formats, can be found on our website. The applicant guidance contains details about each section of the application form. Follow the information in the guidance and on Grantium, ensuring you answer all the questions asked. The form is made up of the following sections: basic details, including project information. This should give us an overview of the project, the very high level who, what, where, why, and when. Finance section. This is where you will detail the income and expenditure for the project. Statutory approvals. You will need to confirm any statutory approvals that may be required for your project, and if applicable, which RIBA work stage you are at. We will touch on this in more detail later, but if you are not following RIBA work stages, please select the Not Applicable box on this section of the application form. Listing status. You'll need to confirm the listing status of the buildings included in the project. Location. List all sites where funded activity will take place. Ownership of land and buildings. This is for building projects only, but you will need to be able to demonstrate that you own the land and/or buildings, either as a freehold or a leasehold, on which you will spend the grant, and that the land and buildings can be used for the project purposes. Activity plan. List key tasks and timetable for the funded activity. Partners. List any partners, and if they are confirmed or expected. A reminder that we provide detail in the first guidance video about the project description and evidencing need sections. The recording is on our website. Response to the brief or the proposal. You should write a narrative for each of the following sections as detailed in the How to Apply part of the guidance. Use the prompts to fully structure your response. There are also assessor prompts in the guidance, How Decisions Are Made, that give more detail about information we are looking for and how these narrative sections are used to assess your full application. Make sure you take full advantage of each of these parts of the guidance. A little more detail about each section. Meeting the brief. Tell us how the project meets the criteria in the guidance, as well as a review of the overall preparedness of the project, particularly for those building projects. Governance and management. Set out your plans for managing the project, including how you will ensure it's delivered on time, within budget, and within the delivery timescale for this fund. Include any detail about partners' involvement in the project. Financial viability. Tell us about your work to assess the project's financial impact on your organisation, both during and after the project. This section should include detail about the budget and your financial management approach. Some points to note on budgets and financial viability. Income and expenditure. No match funding is required for LIFT projects, but it can strengthen an application. Remember to include support in kind, which is any goods or services you receive during the funding period towards the project, either for free or at a reduced rate. That value can contribute towards your match funding as support in kind. All costs should be able to be capitalised on your balance sheet. Anything unable to be capitalised at the end of the project may result in a reduced award. The more detail, the better. It helps us understand exactly what the funding is being spent on and gives confidence that the budget is realistic. Inflation. Inflation levels in the construction industry are volatile at the moment, and we need applicants to ensure that they have taken this into consideration when writing an application for LIF. We strongly advise all applicants to seek professional advice on this element of their budget to calculate a realistic, future-facing figure for your expenditure. Arts Council England will not increase grants once awarded. So if inflationary increases mean that applicants do not have enough funds to complete their project, they will need to source additional funding elsewhere to complete the works outlined in the funding agreement. Please see our full terms and conditions for more information about grant holder obligations under the funding agreement and agreed programme of works. It is important that in your application you show clearly what your inflation figure is and how it has been calculated. Please be aware that inflation should be considered as separate from general contingency. This will help us to understand your budget and the appropriateness of your figures. Contingency. Your contingency should be appropriate to your project, and figures are expected to align with the costed risk register. Please ensure you include an appropriate contingency figure in your budget. Just a quick note on increasing the amount of funding requested at expression of interest to application. You can only apply for activity outlined in your expression of interest. You should not apply for activities that were not detailed in your expression of interest. We understand that your project planning will be more developed by the time you submit your full application, and there might be some slight variance in costs. Inflation may also mean that some costs have increased. To support you with your application, you can apply for up to 10% more funding in your full application from the amount detailed in your expression of interest. This cannot be for any items of expenditure that were not included in your expression of interest, and you cannot exceed the £500,000 maximum. You will need to provide evidence and demonstrate why the increased costs have occurred as part of your full application submission. Moving on to building projects. We talked about building projects in detail in the first guidance video, but I'm briefly going to go over some key points. Your project will be classed as a building project if any statutory approvals are required or apply. In this case, you'll be required to provide additional documents and information as part of your application, which will be discussed later in this video. There are a few different types of statutory approval, but the ones that most regularly apply to LIF are planning permission, outline or full, building regulations approval, listed building consent for amendments to listed buildings. If there is any element of construction or demolition, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, MEP work, or amendments to internal structures, then statutory approvals are most likely required. If it's not, for example, if you are working with an independent contractor who is qualified to assess and sign off the project without local planning authority approval, you must tell us about this in the application. Otherwise, it may be deemed ineligible. Not sure? Take further advice from your professional team and get in touch with your local planning office, or contact us to discuss this further. If statutory approvals are not required for your project, briefly explain why in the application. RIBA plan of work or equivalent. Again, we discussed RIBA work stages in detail in the first webinar, but as a reminder, it is an eligibility requirement that building projects complete RIBA work stage 3 or equivalent level of work by the full application submission on the 1st of August. In a slight change from previous years, if you are not following RIBA work stages, for example, a like-for-like boiler replacement, then your plans should be at an equivalent level of development and detail. We would still expect to see RIBA Stage 3 level of drawings, plans, costings, and other related documents, even if you are not following RIBA work stages. Please ensure that you select the correct box on the application form. If you're not following RIBA stages, please select Not Applicable. Cost plans and design drawings will be required as mandatory attachments for all building projects, even if you're not following the RIBA work stages, and we'll cover this in more detail later. Work Stage 3 is fundamentally about testing and validating the architectural concept to make sure that the architectural and engineering information prepared at Stage 2 is spatially coordinated before the detailed information required to manufacture and construct the building is produced at Stage 4. This should all be informed by the access audit carried out at an earlier stage. You can find out more about this on RIBA's website, as well as in Arts Council England's guide, Building Excellence in the Cultural Sector. A reminder that if you cannot clearly demonstrate that your project is at RIBA Stage 3 or equivalent, your application may be deemed ineligible. Mandatory attachments. All projects, building and non-building, are required to submit a costed risk register as a mandatory attachment. For non-building projects, requiring no statutory approvals, there are no other mandatory attachments required. For building projects, you will also need to submit an access audit, design drawings completed to RIBA Stage 3 or equivalent, and a cost plan based on RIBA Stage 3 or equivalent drawings. We use these documents to help us understand and clarify the information you have provided in the narrative. They are essential to helping us form an understanding of your project, so it's important to get these right. We'll cover these in more detail later in this video. A reminder, mandatory attachments are mandatory. If you think they are exempt, you should speak to us first. Otherwise, we may consider your application to be ineligible or a major risk if they are not included. So let's have a look at each of these documents in more detail. Costed risk register. Risk registers should be costed as far as possible and thorough. Shown here is an example of the type of information we want to see. Show the risk factor, what your mitigations are, some type of scoring system. Here at Arts Council England, we use the classic impact plus likelihood equals total approach. And then a column for potential cost impact of each risk. The lack of costings has been the most consistent weakness of applications from previous rounds. There are three basic types of risks: physical, time, and financial. And some examples of these risks are delays, match funding, supply line issues, inflation, cost impact of closure, asbestos, health and safety, project management, library reviews, user-related risks, cash flow issues. The list goes on. Each project is different and will have different risks associated to it. We want to see that you've considered all the risks and have a plan in place. The costed risk register should inform the contingency figures in your budget. Lack of contingency is in itself a big risk to delivery. So if there's very little detail in your risk register, we won't assume it's a low-risk project. We'll assume you're not prepared. If there's a lot of detail in your risk register, we won't necessarily assume it's a high-risk project. It can actually give confidence in your ability to spot and manage risks throughout the life of the project. This is a useful exercise and should form part of good project management. Access audit. For building projects, the next mandatory attachment required is the access audit. One of the biggest problems we see across applications from many different programmes is that documents submitted as access audits aren't actually access audits. They're access statements, which outline alignment with the Equality Act minimum requirements. An access audit will typically include information such as who has carried out the audit, as well as strengths and weaknesses around signage, transport, getting around, ramps, stairs, lifts, etc., accessible bathrooms, information and accessible formats. And this will result in a list of recommendations for improvements. We want to see this detail. Access audits should influence the project plans from an early stage and be used to inform your plans at RIBA Stage 3 or equivalent. They must be prepared by an independent access consultant, and its findings and recommendations should be reflected in the project. Tell us which recommendations will be implemented and the rationale for excluding any of the recommendations from the project within your application. Strong projects in previous rounds have responded well to access audits and focused on best practice, not just minimum requirements. Cost plans. A reminder that this is a mandatory document for building projects. An issue we often see is that what is submitted as a cost plan is not actually a cost plan. What a lot of people submit instead is just the budget in another format. A cost plan is an industry-specific document prepared by a qualified cost specialist, such as a quantity surveyor. It outlines construction-specific expenses only. They won't cover income or non-construction costs. Cost plans start off their life being quite speculative and becoming more defined as they are updated at each RIBA stage. With your application, we would expect to see cost plans based on RIBA Stage 3 or equivalent drawings, not earlier iterations of your project. It's good practice to include assumptions for costs, inflation, etc., exclusions, items not covered in the cost plan, elemental costs, material quantities and calculations, risks and potential costs, and the final cost plan. Your cost plan should be an accurate reflection of the expected costs for your project and should align with your budget. Design drawings. Again, this is a mandatory document for building projects. There are no hard and fast rules about exactly what RIBA Stage 3 or equivalent drawings should include, as every project is different. But what we're looking for is drawings beyond the initial concept design, which may include plans, elevations and/or sections, and they should include the drawing scale. These may be supported by earlier concepts. As much as you can give us helps us visualise the project. Work to be done should be clearly visible in the drawings. Your design drawings should show where everything will go. So what you'll usually see is a floor plan of the library space with the work to be done clearly shown within that space. This helps us visualise and understand the work to be carried out. It gives us confidence that your cost plan, which should outline the overall cost of any construction work, is up to date and relatively accurate. And it will include notes about the work to be completed and drawing scales. So let's move on to digital projects, some things to consider. And let's look at what makes a successful digital project. We've seen a variety of digital projects over the past 3 rounds of LIF, from Zoom rooms to video and sound editing suites, to interactive technology for all ages, to modernising computer stock and updating self-access systems. They all had some key things in common that clearly identified what they wanted to achieve and worked to ensure that they clearly demonstrated the following key elements. Their goals: staff and users, capacity and prioritisation, maintenance and future-proofing, access and inclusion, and partnerships. So let's look at this in more detail. Some of the things to think about and the detail to include in your application are the goals you've set for your project. Explain what it is you want to achieve and why you have chosen that particular piece of technology. Is it to generate income, attract new users, enable new ways of engaging with your collection, support people from particular backgrounds? And who is it for? Is it a particular segment of your audience or users? Is it to attract new audiences or users, or to increase engagement from existing ones? Think about the impact on staff and users. Any digital project is likely to impact staff and users in lots of different ways. It's really important to think through who is going to be impacted and how. Is there likely to be resistance? Who from and why? Take time to assess and evidence the user need. What is it that people really want from this technology? What is going to help them do better? And how do they want to use it? Make sure there is time for staff and user training. Capacity and prioritisation. Digital projects can take up a lot of time for a lot of people. It can be tempting to try and do lots of things at once, but this tends to lead to problems. It is better to do less and well and make sure everyone is on board before moving on. Find out from users and staff what is most needed and valued. Otherwise, you run the risk of having lots of new infrastructure that doesn't get used. And it's really important to consider who will be able to support users with day-to-day issues. Maintenance and future-proofing. Technology needs ongoing maintenance and can date quickly. For infrastructure and hardware, it's important to consider who will maintain equipment, how quickly it can be repaired if there's an issue, and what the implications are of the equipment being out of service. For newer and more creative technology, it's important to consider the shelf life of the kit. How regularly does the software need to be updated? Where is the content coming from? How are you going to lead people to it? And what adaptations will be needed over time to keep people using it? Access and inclusion. What impact is the project going to have on people who have fewer digital skills and confidence, or on disabled people or older people, for example? Many projects are likely to have a positive impact in this area. For example, by providing people with access to things they may not have at home. Think this through and evidence it in the application. But it's also important to think through who may feel excluded and consider what you can do to support them. Partnerships. Are there people or organisations you can work with who can help maximise the impact of your new technology? For example, are there creatives or learning organisations who can make use of your new production suites to run workshops and programmes? Are there digital skills training providers who can make use of your new computers to build digital skills in the community? These are just a few things worth considering as you refine and add detail to your project. The more you've considered them, the clearer your application will be, and hopefully the smoother your project will run. We want to be able to see in your application that you have clearly thought about all of these elements and that your project is fully viable. So moving on to our balancing criteria and decision making. What happens next? Full applications must be submitted on Grantium by midday, Friday, the 1st of August. Applications are then assessed by Arts Council England against the criteria outlined in the guidance. a programme advisory panel, which is made up of both Arts Council England and DCMS staff, as well as representatives and experts from the library sector, will then review these assessments and make recommendations on which applications could be funded. In making our decisions and recommendations, the panel reviews applications against the following balancing criteria: geography, including Arts Council England's priority places, risk and deliverability, strategic fit, will it deliver against Let's Create, and type of project. These are the criteria we use when difficult decisions have to be made. For example, if most of the strongest applications came from one area, we may end up with an unfairly skewed investment, so we can use geographic balancing to move the money to a different area. Final decisions are made by Arts Council England's Executive Board, and applicants will be notified of decisions no later than the end of March 2026. Thank you for watching today, and here is a reminder of where you can find further information and support. More detail of the fund, applicant guidance, including fully accessible versions, and frequently asked questions can be found on our website. Building Excellence in the Cultural Sector is an Arts Council England document which provides a lot of good advice on construction projects to develop inspiring and sustainable buildings for the future. And if you have questions that aren't covered by the slides, frequently asked questions, or the applicant guidance, please contact our inquiries team via the email at inquiries@artscouncil.org.uk. And finally, we look forward to receiving your full application. Good luck.